over the course of the entire Great Push, we've talked about how tight the competition was, but the day going into the Global Finals Day 3, there were two teams atop the mountain posturing to be able to win this season's Great Push, and those teams, unsurprisingly, are Echo and Mandatory. It's been a very tight TGP. You know, a lot of the competition has been incredibly tight. Everybody, it seems like they're able to put up the top level of keys if they're given enough time. Echo and Mandatory are able to put them up with the highest degree of consistency, which is, you know, what's allowed them to be able to kind of show up. Echo had a phenomenal day 2. So whenever we're looking at this, we're going to be talking about and reviewing the day 2. Echo had the best day 2 by a mile. Mandatory didn't have a bad day. Mandatory had the best day 1 by a mile. But then Echo was able to strike back, you know, and looking at this, you know, we're tied on score. There's only 1:35 that's separating the two teams. A lot of that actually comes down to Brackenhide 21 because Mandatory had a bunch of deaths in Brackenhide 21. So, but if they reran that, they could probably be able to cut off a bunch of this time. But Echo, after yesterday, we talked about how we didn't know if other teams were going to be able to put up this Ultimon 21. Echo has struck back and actually taken that world record tag off of Mandatory. Of course, Echo did have a lot cleaner of a run. They only had 1 death, I think, in total, whereas Mandatory had 5 in theirs. And then both of the teams were able to put up a nice Halls of Infusion 21. Nelthorus 21 seems like the cap of that dungeon, so there's not too much else to talk about with that. So circling around, looking at the rest of the teams, Miscount was a team that I think a lot of people thought they had potential to win the TGP, and I still think that they had potential to win the TGP. They just had a terrible day 1, probably the worst day 1 you could possibly had, and then they had an acceptable day 2, but they needed a perfect day 2. And so while their upper cap is really high, like this team's upper cap on being able to time some of the highest level keys is really high, they were just like struggling a little bit. They did actually kind of speed things up. You see the right top left here. They were able to get their Algothar Academy 22 done pretty quickly, but unfortunately, they still don't even have an Ultimon 21, but they did get that Brackenhide 21 also done relatively quickly, so that allowed them a decent amount more time to be able to time some of the other keys. But they need to go through and, you know, get Halls done on 21, get Nelthorus done on 21, and get Ultimon done on 21 potentially to win. And that seems maybe like a bit too much of an ask for the day. Beyond that, yeah, like I was saying earlier, we have both. Here's this. Look at the top right here. We have Echo in that Ultimon 21. It took them a couple of attempts, but that's kind of to be expected whenever you're looking at a key that is this difficult. They played without a Warlock in this dungeon, and the route that they were playing was, I would say, a lot safer than what Mandatory were doing. But as a result, whenever they're playing a much safer route, their timer is going to be a lot more questionable in some spots, and so that requires them to have a lot more precise and a lot more perfect route. But, you know, this is Echo that we're talking about, and they are able to do things like that. And then Echo, after going and absolutely slamming this Ultimon, if you look in the bottom left here, yeah, like I said earlier, they slammed this Halls of Infusion. They actually 2-pull this first area. So this is the second pull of the dungeon. Let me see if I can get exactly how they set up. So the first pull of the dungeon, they don't actually walk up to the engineering orb. Instead, they play it up front. A lot of teams have actually been walking up to the engineering orb, but Echo actually likes to walk up here, grab this engineering orb as they're gathering this pack, and they do just this. This is psychotic, by the way. They don't grab this trash that's off to here. They grab this trash actually into the. Now actually we'll grab this trash, and then they actually grab this trash up in front as well. I thought that they grabbed this trash into the boss. It was a different team that grabbed this trash into the boss, but they also grabbed this trash that's up front. They put mirrors on this bench here, and they're doing 4 packs at once. This is a lot of containment apparatus beam damage. It's bolstering Tyran, and so whenever this containment apparatus die, because they have probably a third the amount of HP as the rest of the mobs there, then now is going to have to start kiting. And so you see, once those apparatus mobs start dying, now is then just diligently getting away from the mobs. And so great work from him. All right, so Mandatory, 1.5 minutes behind on time tiebreaker. Mandatory actually started going for the home run hit, right? They were playing to win the TGP yesterday, where I'm not convinced that every team can time a Brackenhide 22. I think that probably only Mandatory and Echo have the capacity to be able to time a Brackenhide 22 in terms of time that they have remaining in the rest of their weekend, just because of how much time they've made up on all the rest of their keys, right? They're both at 106 points. So they're the only 2 teams that have capacity to time it. And Mandatory had put 2 really healthy attempts in at that 22 Brackenhide yesterday, getting all the way up to Gutshot. The second attempt even made it past Gutshot. And I think that Mandatory might be the only team, in my opinion, that's going to be able to even time this key on a 22, because a lot of it comes down to Decatric Wrath-Eye's totem killing ability. And whenever you take a look at what Mandatory were running in the 21. Echo was running a lot safer of a build. They weren't running as many unused trinkets. Their Shadow Priest didn't like really sack all their damage. But then whenever you go and look at what Mandatory's doing, they're playing fully offensive. Skylark not even playing Cheat Death Trinket. Instead, he's going to be playing that Last Resort. But they're playing Grief Torch, and then they're playing Desperate Invoker's Codex plus Bellarellos on every single one of their members. And what this translates to is that Desperate Invoker's Codex, it stacks up as you're in combat and doing damage to mobs. And so they actually leave themselves in combat for 15 minutes. So all the way from Gutshot into the end of the dungeon, they're going to be leaving themselves in combat. And if you look at mode here in the top left, he's actually going to run and go tag one of these decaying slimes, and then he's going to Wurnstone back. And this will allow Mandatory to just continuously drag a mob with them for the remainder of the dungeon. And then whenever you go and look at like what Echo was playing in this dungeon, hold on, let me scroll down. Brackenhide. Now, they were playing, they were still playing all new trinkets, but Genji's playing Tome of Unstable Power and Vessel. Mirez is playing double damage trinket. And so their capacity for being able to kill off this many totems with good consistency, I just called into question. Now, it's not that Echo can't, it's more just like how much have they prepared to be able to do this dungeon on a 22. Now, I think that this dungeon is probably going to come down, or this TGP season is going to kind of come down to, is Mandatory able to time the Brackenhide on a 22? And then secondly, if they are, can Echo rebuttal? But if they aren't, I think that Echo is going to be winning on time tiebreaker. And so I think that that's kind of the standing that we're sitting in whenever you start to look at the TGP finals day 3. Like that's like the big storyline. Unfortunately, Madge was in a pretty good position coming into day 2, but they actually wiped, and you can see them in the bottom right here, they wiped 3 times to Decatriarch Rathai on a 21, really just driving home how difficult that boss is. If you have one totem go off, you're going to be very quickly after that wiping. And unfortunately for Madge, they probably eliminated their potential to be able to win the TGP. However, they could still probably come in like 4th, if I had to guess. If they get a 4th in this TGP, that counts as a 1st for them. And so the TGP is really heating up. That's kind of all the stuff that we've been seeing on day 2. That would be your day 2 recap. I'm excited to see what the finals entail tomorrow, today as I'm recording this, but tomorrow. And I hope you guys all have a great rest of your day. Goodbye.